wash your clothes or like brush your teeth without dealing with Procter and Gamble?
Why are we talking about Procter and Gamble when I'm about to introduce episode
Why
69 of the
stop?
Three Body Problem? It is October 24 on a Friday morning, and I have the guys back together after a week off. Juanito, thank you very much for allowing us to publish the audio for your LabsCon keynote. I got some pretty fun reactions. I saw some pretty fun reactions there. We're reconvening after a week off. That was a big week in news around the F5 thing. I don't even know if we'll get time to get to that because there's a bunch of news stories that superseded that. Before I get to that, I want to mention that we are going to be the next, not the next episode, the following episode. We'll be live in Ottawa together for the first time, the three of us, the first week of November at this Countermeasures conference. Have you guys all booked and ready to roll? Kosti, and you're also, in addition to the live podcast, you're doing your iOS forensics class. How is that going? Are you guys all sold out? Is there a pitch?
I don't know if there's
Sell
a
us
pitch,
some shit.
but
Sell something.
we have
Sell something, son.
Look, we have just a few seats left. If anyone's interested, we can even provide our personal discount code, which is CM25-3body with the number 3. There's like this news which just came this week about iOS 26 trying to mess with our capabilities. So we're gonna try to find workarounds around that. There's not just shutdown log. There's other logs you can use for forensics purposes. And I think that this topic of iOS malware hunting forensics, like what do you do after getting the Apple notification? That's pretty much what this class is about. And I think it's becoming more and more interesting for pretty much everyone, because like it's not just politicians or activists who get these notifications, but as we have seen recently, it's like CEOs, company CEOs, people working on the offensive side, and so on. So I think that going forward, we're gonna hear more and more about iOS targeting. And to be honest, I think we're only seeing the tip of the iceberg. Like this is probably a huge issue. It's a much bigger issue than we can actually understand or see from what we can do nowadays. So this will probably get more and more interesting.
Let me ask you a quick question. What do I need to attend your class? Like, do I need a basic elementary knowledge in XYZ? 1 and 2. I attend your class. I'm fully focused. I walk away from there. What have I learned? What am I capable of doing?
So we are trying to expand the capabilities of people who are already doing malware threat hunting. So people who are doing that in their companies, we're trying to give them the tools and the knowledge to include iOS in their capabilities. Because perhaps there's a lot of, let's say, tools and knowledge available how to use Yara for Windows, Linux, whatever endpoint threat hunting, but there's not much information, practical information on how do you go about discovering iOS infections or iOS compromises on your devices. So we're trying to give those tools and knowledge to people who already have, let's say, the basics. They know how to do threat hunting in general, and we're trying to show them how we go about finding the 3 active APTs at any given time on our phones, at least on this side of the world.
Fantastic. So that allows us to segue perfectly into the story that you already mentioned, which is the folks at iVerify. Matthias Freilingsdorf, VP of Research at iVerify, noticed that with iOS 26, this shutdown.log file that you guys have used in the past to kind of be an artifact in one key artifact in detection of iOS malware is now no longer available. It's kind of like was this silent witness, this final shutdown thing. You would take a snapshot and you would have this access to this. With iOS 26, Apple has either wittingly or unwittingly, we don't know yet, blocked this capability. Can you explain a little bit, Costin, and what have you used this shutdown.log? How important is it? The removal of it, how much does it affect not only your own class, but your ability to do forensics?
I mean, yes. So shutdown log is a very important artifact on iOS. We've been using this for years. Why? Because whenever you reboot your phone, and remember, one of my top recommendations, if you care about your iOS device security, is reboot every day. So what this does is, if you reboot every day, every time you reboot, it writes a list of running processes at the time of shutdown to this shutdown log file. So that means that if you have some persistence malware or like files that shouldn't be running in your system, which are actually running as processes in your system, they will get returned to this shutdown log. So over time, this grows every time you reboot. This file gets bigger, bigger, bigger. So like if you, let's say, if you do like a reboot every month, after a couple of years, maybe it will be in a range of hundreds of kilobytes. But if you reboot every day, it will be megabytes. Still not too big of an issue when iPhones have 256 gigabytes, 512 gigabytes. So it's not a real problem, the size at least. So this file, when you get it from out of the phone with a sysdx, it allows you to go back in time and check for IOCs. So if there's known IOCs that you have, let's say for Pegasus or pretty much any other stuff, you can actually search them in this file. And I have seen with my own eyes, I've seen shutdown log files which held traces of Pegasus infection. So it was pretty visible. One of my former colleagues, Hamid, he built an open source tool to analyze it. And I built my own tool with a database, like a whitelisting database behind it and other heuristics. And it's very, very powerful. So it makes absolutely no sense to me from a threat hunting point of view to kill this fantastic feature. Now, if your goal, let's like be the conspiracy Ryan.
I have conspiracy questions a lot.
You have your conspiracy hat. Like, if you want to do the conspiracy side of things, then let's say, well, if you are having an issue with people complaining about malware infections and finding them this way, then removing this file or just deleting it on every boot or truncating it on every boot is a nice way of getting rid of all those complaints. So like no infection, well, no traces, no infection. No infection, no problem. No problem, stock up.
Yeah, I
So
can't imagine. I can't
yeah.
imagine. Even for conspiracy, Ryan, that's a little bit of a stretch. Let me just throw it to Juanito. Do you think this is a performance thing? It's intended for system hygiene, performance, storage space, or an oversight, maybe? Or do you like? Question is, does Apple know that shutdown.log is a key tool used to track
Oh, there's
Pegasus?
no way they don't know. At the same time, is this a intentional thing? Like I'm willing to give them the benefit of the doubt on this update, given that it's like a whole new like iOS 26 is like a whole new thing. But I'm curious, like, does the next update keep doing that, or does it fix it? Right? Like if
Do
they
they
roll
roll
that
back it
back
as
and
like
it's like,
some sort of error?
yeah,
Right.
like an oopsie, right? You go, not our bad. We didn't really mean to do that. It's like, all right. I mean, that kind of shit happens, right? It's still unfortunate, but it happens, right?
Why are we
But
giving
I don't
Apple the
know.
benefit of
Like
the
with
doubt?
Apple, we look. I don't know. I don't know that we need to
Because
on this
we
particular.
complain
Yeah,
bitterly that the one thing we don't like about the Apple and the iOS ecosystem is that they don't allow us to get logs and they don't allow us to do our own forensics. They don't. And here
yeah.
we are, they're removing another one that Costin and all the other guys are saying it's one, a crucial part of it. Like, what the fuck?
I'm. It's not like I'm dying to cut them some slack. I'm just saying that mistakes happen, right? So, and frankly, even if they did it on purpose, maybe I'm hoping that giving them that little bit of slack, if enough people are pissed about it, which whatever, like that they'll just be like, oh no, we didn't mean to do that. Our bad, right? Um, I don't know. Like I don't want to think of them on some level. I really don't want to get locked into thinking of Apple as a purposefully like as a purposefully obfuscating entity when it comes to these things because if I'm honest, there's not a good world for us where we are fighting against the ecosystem maintainer for visibility, and that's already where we're at. So it's one thing if they don't make it particularly easy for the average person to know what's going on. It's another for them to be actively fighting against what Citizen Lab
Correct.
and Coastin and others are going to be doing. And I just don't want to get locked into that space where we already view them that way, unless we're absolutely there.
Right.
And I'm hoping that that's not the case because, frankly, you know, they are the greatest entity when it comes to security engineering on Earth, and they deserve that credit. There is no need for them to be acting in a genuinely limiting fashion when it comes to security research. They need it, and
They
they
have a
don't
threat
like the.
intel team. They have hunting teams in there. Like we know this. No?
I mean, they do. They absolutely do. They have Seer and everything, and like we now, we have friends over there. But at the same time, it's such a weird, obfuscated, like hidden org, and what they produce is so inaccessible to anybody who doesn't work there that I'm not saying they're not doing their jobs. I'm just saying that I don't know what their job looks like. Like, I don't know if the priority is finding these things or if the
Right.
priority is profiling companies like NSO. I don't know if the priority is tracking developers of exploits or if the priority is keeping track of threat actors that are using these sorts of tools. And we've seen it over the past 10 years at Apple, where they have been willing to shift those remits in really drastic ways, where you go, whoa, like that is not industry standard. It's not what we would expect from you. It's not what people are asking of you. And yet, that's the sole focus of the one team that you have put on this thing. So, they're willing to be quite obtuse and quite, Apple-y in their way of doing things. And I'm sure that they have all kinds of wonderful justifications for the choices that they make. At the same time, we're in a new era of Seer and a new era of some of these places, and I like to leave the door open because I think a lot of the time, what ends up happening is a company like Apple is fucking weird. They have a fucking weird culture, and within that fucking weird culture, personalities get to have an outsized impact without a lot of pushback. So, my hope is if the personalities of the past that have made choices that I personally think are mistakes and clearly have been mistakes in some of their results, if those people are gone or they're less powerful or they've receded or they've retired or
Yeah.
they're enjoying their horses and
The
like whatever it
cycle
is
of
that they
crap, yeah.
do, then I'm hoping that means that some other voice gets to walk up and go, hey, why don't we do this, totally innovative, reasonable thing everybody was asking us to do in the first place?
Yeah.
Um, so I just don't want to paint them into a box where I'm like, yo, these people are never going to be,
Yeah, but they're
good
still
or.
going to be happily. I mean, people have asked Ivan Kirstich about this on Twitter, like specifically tagged him. No answer whatsoever. And I know he reads everything on Twitter because he's pinged me about stuff I've said on Twitter,
Well,
right? Like, here's the
if
thing. Why do we have to find out from iVerify in some kind of like, oh shit, by the way, guys, did you guys notice this? Versus, okay, there's a justification, there's a reason. Apple is a company and Seer is this modern, forward looking, technical security research operation. Like, do better. Like,
I mean, that's precisely why you have to find out because Apple is Apple in its own fucking weirdness, right? And there's
yeah.
a reason even look, even Ivan, as senior as he is, as established as he is, and as successful as he is within Apple, is not comfortable tweeting and replying to
True,
things that you're
true.
saying.
He's
So
running away
how
from
is
coming on this podcast. Like,
he's not?
what's
I mean,
so hard about?
he's
Come
not
on, what's
running
so
away
hard about
from
coming
it.
on here and having a chat with us like grown men having coffee? Like,
Nothing except that. Look, that's not Ivan's fault. That's Apple's fault.
he's a
Apple
grown man. I mean,
He is
you're
a
a
grown
grown
man, but
senior
I
man at Apple,
look,
right? Like,
he's a grown senior man, but I'm not telling him that he should give up $20 million in RSUs to come have a fucking conversation with us.
man, come
And
on.
that's the problem. The problem there is the company. It's not Ivan. If it look
The
like I
company is the people in the company, though, right? They were quick to send Craig to tell us that we're wrong about see some stuff with his like sweaty armpits, but like, you know what I mean? Like they know how to
Craig
come
is
out and use the media for what they want to say. But when people have legitimate, simple questions, and like it wouldn't be an adversarial podcast if he comes on this show. We'll ask him the questions that
well.
people are asking, and we'll take his answers at face value. Like,
It's not like he's going on other podcasts and not coming on this podcast.
he's
Like
keynoting conferences to do promotion for like this memory
they just
integrity.
don't let them talk, dude. They don't let these people tweet in peace. Nobody has a personality
Pushback.
publicly.
So push back. If you're
I
getting
do
all
think
this shit, if you're getting all this shit from dumbasses on podcasts like us, like push back internally.
I do agree that they should push back. I do think that that is a fault of Apple that I think it does not
It's
stand the test of
bullshit.
time.
Fucking
It's not
bullshit.
anything excusable. I don't and it's the reason that a lot of us have never been willing to go work at Apple. Like I think I would have more of a public profile if I worked at the fucking NSA than if I worked at Apple.
Juanito,
And
you know
that's
that Apple and its people lean on us to validate what they do and the things that they do, and they back channel you for all this stuff. But
yeah,
as soon as you ask for any sort of information publicly, it's like,
yeah.
oh, Apple doesn't allow us to talk, so go away and stop trying to influence us with all this shit. That's my
Yeah.
take.
Not only do they lean on that, I don't know how much of what Sear and these other teams report and discuss is just built, like how much of it starts with them and ends up with Citizen Lab, let's say, versus how much starts with Citizen Lab and ends up at Apple getting fixed. And I think that's the part where discounting real hunting and the value of it and the importance of like doing threat intel proper, not pretending that you're above it or that it has no value, which is what they did for years. Um,
Mm.
I think that's something you get away with when you just essentially obfuscate where the gains came from. You just pretend that that never happened here or there, and it's maybe just a thing that, oh, we already knew about that, or we figured it out, or we told them about it, or it's already fixed. Like, sure, but we know you left a lot of gains on the table, and we know that because any other company would be desperate to say, we found this tiny sliver of a thing. Do you have more? Do you have more? Do you have anything else? Do
Isn't
you
that
know where
how?
this
Yeah.
came from? They don't do that. They just don't.
Costin, do
So,
you feel
yeah.
do you feel as a forensics guy that Apple has an adversarial relationship with you as a hunter?
Um, ooh, tough question. You know my opinion, and I've said it before on this podcast that
Say it again, please.
on
Good in your
page
book,
five,
bad in your book.
like where, like all the people are listed. Juan is okay, Ryan is okay, Paul is super okay, Apple not okay.
Wait, wait, wait,
So,
wait, 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 wait. I need to be super okay, bro.
Moldy
Yeah.
is more okay than we are. You're
all
not
right.
okay enough.
So Apple is not okay. In your opinion, this is a backward step.
Look, I think that Apple has an image problem. So every day in the news, what are you reading about? Like a new attack against iPhones targeted with some new malware, new iPhone 0 days, new iPhone 0 clicks. That's everything that you read about. And comparing it to Android, it doesn't mean that there's the same amount of targeting happening against Android users. The only difference, I think, that we have much better forensic capabilities on iPhones than people have on Android, which is why we have a lot more of these stories, which again is causing an image problem for Apple. So when you have this problem and the same amount of targeting as the Android users, what do you need to do? You need to fix this perception problem. So let's say reducing the amount of complaints and stories that paint you in a negative image is one of the things
That's
that you need to
conspiracy
take
shit, though.
care of. No, this is like practical investment driven, profit driven strategy. This is
Okay.
a good strategy. If I was the CEO of any company, and I need to solve this public perception image. Obviously, this wouldn't be the only thing that I would do. I would do a lot of other things, such as implement MTE, memory protections, and so on. Oh, wait, they're doing that already. Then I would be doing like other things as well, such as security conferences, working with security researchers, giving
Oh
them
wait.
security devices. Oh, well, they're not giving them security device. So I'll be doing a lot of other things, nevertheless. But this is one of the things that you need to fix in order to fix this image problem. So I'm not surprised, but on the other hand, Still, iPhones don't forget that they have much better forensics capabilities than Android phones.
And if you come to countermeasures training, you will learn all about it. You know,
Not all, but a small fraction. Yeah,
one line I
because
want to flag.
nobody knows all.
One line I want to flag from the iVerify blog is that given the implications of this shutdown.log change, right? They're suggesting that listen, before you update to iOS 26, take and save a sysdiagnose of your device to preserve current shutdown.log and any sort of potential evidence it may contain because you'll lose that eventually. Question for you quickly, Costin. How do I take and save a sysdiagnose on my device? Is there a bunch of clicks I need to do? Is that a
Very
known
easy.
thing?
Yeah, it's very easy. It's a special combination, button combination. You push volume up, volume down, and power like very quickly, and the phone will make a small buzz, and then it will take some time for it to generate this sysdiag file. So if you go to diagnostics, you will see that happening. Like it will be shown as in progress, and it will take maybe 3, 4, 5 minutes, depending on how old your phone is, to generate this SysDiag, and then you need to transfer it to your phone, which you can do either, let's say, from the command line using command line tools on Linux or Windows, or using iTunes. When you transfer the diagnostic logs from the phone with the iTunes sync, it will also get the SysDiag from it.
They also recommend holding off on iOS 26 altogether until Apple addresses this issue, suggesting that it might be witting or unwitting, it might be rolled back, it might be a bug that needs to be fixed, and so on. What is your best gut?
Look, one thing I can tell you for sure, which is that whenever Apple drops a new operating system version, that is a huge headache for the people developing exploits, tools, because they need to very quickly adapt, adjust, test those tools on the new versions of iOS. And sometimes the exploits won't work anymore because of the offsets. So my advice would be yes, you want to upgrade to iOS 26 as soon as possible.
So don't hold off. Upgrade.
That would be my
I think the
advice.
concern is what you
But like
want to get
I,
out of
I
it,
would still
right?
copy the logs. I would still
Well,
copy the logs.
we're talking
Uh,
to people who are targets, right? Let's
Sure.
assume the people we're talking to right now are people who believe I'm a target of this thing. These guys are saying before update, they take this sysdiagnose, which is good advice. The second advice you disagree with, basically.
So what I think, this is again my opinion, is that more important is once you save your CSDA, right? It's more important that you upgrade the phone to a state where it will be more difficult to hack, as opposed to keeping this older version with be a bit better forensic capabilities. This shutdown log is just one of many ways that you can find if the phone has been targeted or infected, and there are others. In long term, to me, upgrading sounds like a safer procedure, but this is my personal opinion.
It just sounds like incomplete advice from the iVerify folks. Because if you think about it, right, what they're saying is this thing is going to stomp the existing shutdown log, and you want to have a copy of that. And what Kostin is saying, yeah, get a copy of it, and then upgrade the fucking phone to the latest
Mhm.
version, right? Like
Right, but
I
after
think it's
upgrading,
just
you don't get it.
is the stomping during the upgrade, or is it all the time? Like that's what I'm trying to understand is
I
how
think
are you
what they
losing the
mean is
access to it?
the moment you reboot, the moment that you reboot iOS 26, it will just truncate that file, so you'll lose the old
Got it.
logs.
Got it.
Anyway, so let's hope something comes out of it and they don't.
That just sounds like a mistake. That just sounds like somebody like just set a limit, like a buffer of some sort,
Somebody would
trying
have
to make it
answered on
so it.
Twitter already, though. Like, wouldn't somebody have clarified that on Twitter already at some point, some back channel person? Anyway, I
I
don't know.
think the problem is the people who are REing, the people who RE iOS. It's too valuable for them to actually discuss it publicly. But like, I would expect like Stefan Esser or somebody to just be like, "Yeah, they added this little line here. Like, it's shitty, you know." But I don't know, man. Like, reversing iOS
Yeah,
is one of those things that like
I,
generates
I
so
I can
much.
tell you something interesting here, which is that in the beta versions of iOS 26, this truncation didn't happen. So
Ah,
I got my hands. For instance, we worked on a case where somebody who got this notification from Apple, they made a sysdiag and their phone was on iOS 26 and the beta, and the shutdown log was complete. Like they had like the full history of the shutdown log. So this must be something like new, kind of a new addition, perhaps in the release version. But one thing I can tell you is that this beta version did not truncate it, so it must be
interesting.
new.
Speaking of exploits and exploitation, a story I want to touch on very, very quickly is the ZDI had their Pwn2Own Ireland competition in Ireland, and we got news earlier that a researcher who is possibly Eugene Chan with Team Z3, I've never heard of Team Z3, was going to appear at Pwn2Own with a zero-click exploit for WhatsApp, which was eligible for a $1 million prize. There was a lot of chatter on Twitter when ZDI announced that they were going to make this attempt, and then ZDI announced subsequently, in a couple of days later, that Team Z3 has withdrawn their WhatsApp entry. No explanation, no anything. Back channel, I've heard that they've chosen to disclose it privately to Meta. I don't know if Meta pays for it, but it's a pretty
Meta's
significant bug.
Meta's paying AI money for bugs now.
Well,
Like,
if the guy is going to turn down $1 million from a successful Pwn2Own entry, Meta must have sweetened the pot for him to not even put it there, to give it to them directly. Costin, this is the kind of exploit that is the good stuff, right?
Well, these would be definitely worth more than 1 million, in my opinion. If it's like a zero-click exploit against WhatsApp with no traces, then probably it's worth more. However, I just want to emphasize this story has a certain drama smell to it. I
Manufactured drama.
No, but like more happening behind the curtains, in the sense that if Eugene Chen is Chinese, how is he allowed by the Chinese government to even disclose this bug to whoever? Shouldn't he be first offering to the Chinese government?
is he?
I don't know. I'm
But that's an
just
assumption
saying.
that he's Chinese, right? I mean,
Right.
Nobody knows. So nobody's heard of Team Z3 before. There's an X account, 3 Eugene 3, possibly the same person. We don't know for sure. It was registered in 2011, so it's pretty old, but has never posted any messages on
that's the
Twitter.
account that's the account that the official ZDI blog mentioned,
Uh,
that Eugene
they
of Team Z3. Yeah.
Yeah, they say at 3 Eugene 3, but they don't say if that at is an account on X, or maybe I don't know, it's just his handle somewhere. So maybe it's on their own platform. So we don't know like for sure that it's the same guy. It could be. Maybe he is. And maybe he's Chinese. Maybe I don't know. Maybe he's from Singapore or somewhere else
Oh,
with
Taiwan
the name,
or yeah.
or Taiwan. Maybe he's American. But again, nobody's heard of Team Z3 before. This is a new team. I don't think they ever participated before. No, and at least in the circles, my circles, nobody's heard of Eugene Chen before. This doesn't mean that he doesn't exist. He's not legit and he doesn't have this bug. But
Mm-hmm.
the whole story has a certain, I don't know, drama
Intrigue.
angle to it. No drama. Like, is it
It's
the
drama.
Chinese government preventing them from doing this?
Ah, I
Has
see.
something happened? Like this,
Jeez,
I
your
think CDI,
conspiracy hat is bigger
CDI
than
said
mine.
problem with flights, like because of the flight disruptions or something like this, or visa. So like,
If it was
were
the
they not
Chinese
allowed
government
to
though,
fly
like
out of the
that.
country? Like, what happened there?
But if it
That's
was the
what I want.
Chinese government, which again, we're just assuming it on the basis of like a name, which
Mm,
I
It would
wouldn't
not have
take too
even been
far.
submitted.
mm.
Well, I mean, selling it to Meta doesn't make it any better, right? Like it's still an issue, right? Like it's still public and it's still, you're not hiding that from the Chinese. So, I don't know that that's it. But then again, the exploit circles tend to have so much drama to them. It's kind of
Yeah.
funny. Like
Someone reliable
they're
told me that Meta is getting the bugs. So
Mm-hmm.
it must have been a
Mm-hmm.
chain.
right. Everything's a chain now.
Someone reliably said that Meta is getting the bugs. The fact that you can turn down $1 million entry if this is a winning entry, it meant that Meta must have sweetened the pot. I know they pay significant for this kind of bug, so maybe it just gets
No,
it
The
killed
Zuck
without.
bucks,
if
you can
if
just
I
leverage those.
if I were Meta, whenever, let's say, somebody shows up with something like this, what I would do instead of just paying them for the bug, I would offer them a contract. So I think that's a lot more valuable. Like, why not offer Team Z3 a contract in which Meta is actually giving them some money and they do iOS security, and if they find or not vulnerabilities, they report them to Meta. So I think that's a
You're
way
just
more lucrative business than buying
you're just
bugs one by one.
recruiting them into your bug bounty program, which they
Well,
don't
that's
really
what you
want. Yeah.
should.
And
That's what
that's
you
what you
should
should.
do.
And they should sign an NDA, and they're not allowed to sell these bugs to anyone else
Yeah,
and
but
things
nobody
like that.
wants to sign that shit. Like,
But dude,
But
going back to
it's
the Apple
guaranteed money.
thing, yeah, yeah. That look, I think Kosin's right, and I think this is a thing that we have, I think, beat Apple up for in private circles in the past, right? Like if you have Apple or Meta money, you're willing to pay a 1 million or whatever for a fucking random ass bug that you have to validate. Um, why on earth you're not going to these Chinese folks and to some of the special folks in Europe that were working with NSO and creating all these bugs and saying, "Hey guys, look, like we're extending this to a friend. Here's an offer of like you're gonna make $1 million in total comp every year, and we're gonna pay you for each full chain that you come up with, as if you had submitted it through a bug bounty, but it goes directly to us,
proper
and
incentives.
no questions asked, right? Like we're not going to make you make less money. We're not just gagging you. We're saying come live in a perfect market where every bug you find will be paid for, and you don't have to go through brokers, and you don't have to worry about being shady or getting sanctioned. Like that's if you're willing to pay hundreds of millions for AI devs, what's keeping you from spending, I don't know, 10 million on an iOS exploit dev who's a rarer talent than an AI dev these days, and just enrich them? I think the
Right, but you
problem
can't
here
do
is
that
like
at
it's all a
scale.
bargain.
You can't do that at scale if there's 25 of these guys and
But
then
there's no
30 of these guys.
scale. There is no scale. Like there really aren't that many of these fucking
Eh,
people making these
ev-
things.
every
It's
time you go to
hard.
Pwn2Own, there's like some new guy with a freaking chain doing some amazing things. It's not like this is the purview of what used to be 10 people capable
Well,
of doing it.
let's put it a different way, right? After hiring how many of those dudes? Because effectively what you're doing is hiring a private project zero.
Yeah.
After hiring how many of those dudes are these chains just getting rarer and harder to the point where you don't have 25 people showing up, right? Like that's
Yeah.
the whole fucking point of this.
Yeah, but what you're
Like
talking
nobody's
about has already
replicated
happened. I
P0.
was at Pwn2Own in the early aughts in the 2000s when, what's the name of the guy? Pinkie Pie showed up and blasted through all three browsers at the time, right? And I believe it was Apple who hired him. Do you know who eventually Pinkie Pie was, right? Comic. So Apple eventually hired this comics guy, and that's already always part of the process. Every time somebody submits one of these most amazing things, they try to hire them. Project Zero is
Yeah,
pulled in, I believe, Fratrich or one of these guys. Yeah,
but dude, you're hiring them under what terms? Because that
I
my
know what
my
you're saying.
issue here is unless you're paying NBA money for this, which you should be, right? Like you're not actually giving them a good deal. You're just trying to treat them like idiots, and that's something that happens a
Just
lot with
remove
these
them from the
companies.
market by
Yeah,
hiring
you're
them.
like, hey kid, how's a $250,000 a year and some RSUs? And you're like, fuck you. Every time I do this, I make $1 million, and like I get to go home and do whatever the fuck I want, and I tweet all day. Like, no. But if you walked up to them and gave them like a Zuckerberg AI offer, and you said, hey man, from now on it's this much a year, and every bug you make, we're still gonna pay you as if you were outside, okay. Like you've taken all the uncertainty out of it where you go, we're working, me and my team of buddies are working on this exploit chain. We don't know if it's going to work. And if it works, we don't know how long it's going to live. And if it lives, we don't know if we're going to be able to sell it. And if we can sell it, we don't know how long we're going to get paid for. And if we get paid, we don't know if we're going to get sanctioned. Right? Like that's a shitty fucking situation to work in that you can leverage by saying, nah man, you work at Apple, you have health insurance, and you're gonna make similar money, and you still have the incentive to find these fucking things. Like that's what's I feel like that's missing. There's no way that these companies are treating it that way and this market stays the same as it is. Otherwise, people would be fucking clamoring to go work inside of Apple's internal exploitation powerhouse, and
Dude,
that shit's
everybody
not
who wants an
happening.
SRD, a security research device, can't even get one. Like they hoard
I
those things. Like I know, Costin, have you applied again?
This time no, I haven't.
Just got fed up. You see, this
just
is how
gave
you
up.
treat
It's
Yeah.
researchers.
whatever.
Hey, we don't
Man.
have this story like prominently on the list, but I wanted to flag it quickly off the top. Is this Microsoft? By the way, the week we missed, Microsoft had their big, massive 200 bug patch Tuesday, including like a bunch of ODs and stuff. That stuff is so
They
normal.
knew.
Water is wet
They
that
knew you were out. That's
it's
me.
not even on our freaking list. But I just saw a note from Jamie Levy at Huntress
100.
that exploitation of a Windows Server Update Services remote code execution CVE 2025-59287 has been detected, and that's coming off of that patch Tuesday. Our buddy Hamid Kashfi flagged this last week on Twitter, saying that Microsoft casually patched this last week. Easy to find and exploit pre-auth RCE in WSUS. Vulnerable versions date back to 2012 and pretty easy to exploit. I believe Microsoft went out of band with this one. It might not have been through Patch Tuesday, but it just quietly went out of band with this one. Costin, have you looked at it at all? Anything you can share?
Only briefly, because Hamid highlighted it on X, I think like a week ago or so. I have not seen the signs of exploitation yet, at least at the time when he was talking about, and he was saying like it's super trivial to exploit, therefore it's a high risk one. But I understand obviously that the exploitation is beginning, which is like kind of typical for these kind of things. From the moment that they are patched, it's only a matter of time before somebody reverse engineers the patch, writes the exploit, especially if it's trivial, and begins massively scanning the internet for vulnerable servers.
Hunter said they detected exploitation across 4 customers, and they're an MDR, so they have downstream customers. Anytime there's this kind of bug in an update service, which compromise of an updating service, it sets off your hackers. I believe there was one of these in one of the big APTs back in the day,
Flame.
the God mode Flame, correct? Juan, are you guys SentinelOne tracking this? Is this something that what's your recommendation to Windows fleet admins who are like staring at this shit? Is this one of those patch yesterday kind of things?
I mean, I'll be honest. I haven't looked at it fully, and I need to check in because I know the team has been like starting to do all the downstream hunting. So I need to check in sort of what we find with any of these, man. It's like go patch ASAP. But I'll actually emphasize something a little bit bigger, which is I wish more folks who have decent EDRs would actually spend a little time checking in with their EDR folks to say, hey, how well configured are we? Like one of the bigger issues that we get, surprisingly, is how often you're almost fighting with the admins that are managing your product. And there's all
What
kinds
do
of
you mean,
discussions
you
that
as the EDR vendor?
yeah, you as the
Gotcha.
EDR vendor or the MSSPs or the MDR companies that have to manage this, where it's surprising how often it almost comes off as if the incentives are aligned against each other, which I think is also a product issue, right? Like it's
Is
not
it?
just on the users, but you get into these weird situations where you go, guys, like why isn't this being logged, or like why have you excluded this whole area of what the product does, or like why is this feature not quite enabled, right? And like those are the moments where usually those conversations are had in the aftermath of something like this, where a Windows component in particular is at fault or is a problem, is an issue. And there's this assumption that anything Microsoft is so holy that like you don't need to be looking over its shoulder. And that's what happened to us with like, once Microsoft broke the whole code signing mechanism with like, oh, now you can get signed by Microsoft, right? Like that was a shit show. We all had to rejigger, re-engineer around that. We're still like having, everyone's having a performance hit because all of a sudden you can't trust Microsoft SIGs anymore and stuff like that. There's an issue there where I'm not saying that products can't do better, including our own. Everybody can do better, and you can try to incentivize better actions from your users. But until we get to that holy state of perfect product development, these are the opportunities to sit down with your MDR people and say, okay, guys, like, what would make what are look at our config, like, should we be excluding this? Can we narrow down the scope of this exclusion? Can we narrow this thing? Because like something that came up with all the Huntress drama from not too long ago is how much control an MDR or an MSSP actually has over that product. And the truth is that like there are many situations where I'm the guy in the room going, just fucking do it. Like just force the users to have these things turned on and off and changed. And there's a lawyer there who actually is right. Contractually, no, you're not supposed to just go flip bits and switches and say, look, this is good for you. But like there's this tension between what users think they should be in charge of, and frankly, it's their computers, it's their enterprise, and like if they want to ride roughshod with an EDR that's half turned off, like that's your
Well,
fucking company,
can
right? Like,
can we just kind of linger there for a second, because
yeah.
this half turned off, and it feels like you're shifting a lot of the onus on the wait, let me ask the question. It feels like you're shifting a lot of the onus onto the customers, and I argue that why isn't it a default setting that you ship? Because
No,
that's the thing, right? It's your default
yeah.
choices that I absorb and I kind of go along with. I'm not going through manually clicking a
So
million buttons. So help me understand how you think about that.
I agree with you, but you need to think of it not as like the golden state that we start with. What's the real issue? I started making a product 5 years ago. You bought the product last year. I now have saner defaults because I now have greater capabilities, or I've learned from the things that
Or
happen,
you've
or
shipped 100 new features.
exactly. I've shipped 100 new features. They're not all turned on by default, and I think they should be turned on by default. And we, like, contractually, what you agreed to was in a given state when you signed, and we now need to have, like, look,
This is the
we can
conversation the cloud guys are having, right? Like Google
it's the
ships.
conversation everyone who sells a fucking SaaS or SaaS
Correct.
product is having of some sort, which is technically you own it, technically it's for you. In some cases, like, and this is something apparently people don't understand because of the amount of shit that Huntress got, I think rather unfairly, last time we discussed this. The conversation, what it doesn't include is you're paying, in some cases, you're paying us or Huntress or whomever to be the regent that controls the thing, that looks over whether you're, like infected or not, whether your alerts are managed or not, whether you need to kick off an IR or not. And yet, you don't necessarily control the configuration and settings of what's turned on, excluded, and whatnot. It's a really weird tension. And what I tell you is, I think we often imagine a very ideal situation where the MSSP is very engaged and thoughtful and honest, and the customer is very engaged and thoughtful and interested. But many, 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 many more situations are customers who don't want to hear from you. They say, we're paying you, manage the alerts, and fuck off.
Yeah,
and you
and
go,
that's the majority of folks who just want a default thing. I'm not going to click through a million of your million settings. That's right. If you buy Google Workspace, for instance, it comes out of the box. You still have to go reconfigure. That's why we have a VC powered security ecosystem, just to configure those
Right.
layers that lead to misconfiguration. And then it becomes an issue of customer shaming. Well, if you had flicked that on, or if you had, no, I hear it a lot.
yeah. Look,
Right?
it shouldn't be customer shaming, but I think the real issue, there's a bunch of people at fault here. And there's no version in
And
which
it's never the customer, or it
Well,
shouldn't ever be the
no, no, no,
customer.
no. There's definitely, and Kosten's laughing too, because we've worked, there are many times when it is the customer. There are times when the customer has taken the default and turned it off. There are times when the customer bought the product and decided an exclusion on all of C drive was a normal thing to do. And you're raising alerts going, hey, that's not a good configuration. And they go, hey, fuck you, it's our product, we're going to do whatever we want. And then they get popped and you get a complaint from somebody higher up the chain who says, how could you not protect us? You go, what the fuck? Right? Like there's this weird shifting of blame. Now, that said, it's not always the customer. It's many times not the customer. And you're absolutely right about the defaults. What I actually think is a lot more of this needs to fall on legal departments. Like the bigger issue here is that so much of this is mediated by contracts to such a granular state sometimes that there's privacy officers who are coming up with important limitations, which is a way of us saying, oh, we would never do X, Y, and Z, and we won't. But there are aspects of this that I think need to be a little more fluid and a little bit more cognizant of what certain situations entail. There are times when we have to go fight up to our legal folks and say, look, we need to turn this thing on today because this thing is happening today that we need to protect people on. And it doesn't matter that you're not supposed to do this and that's not necessarily agreed. Send out a communication. Do whatever the fuck you have to do. But to protect our people, our customers, this thing should be turned on. And you would be surprised at the levels of like legal intransigence and friction, not necessarily with us. Like I think we actually have a really great CLO and like our legal team is phenomenal. They're super enabling to us. But I know the discussions, like we have some of those discussions and they just happen to go well because we have good legal people. But I hear from a lot of other folks who then go to their legal teams go, no, that's not in the contract. Go away. And you
Two
go,
things from different side of the aisle. One is I find I'm hearing a lot of now is people blaming legal. Why didn't you disclose this? Oh, the legal people didn't allow us. Right. So legal becomes kind of like a crutch where people get to throw it on legal. So let's be careful about that. The other point I want to make in defense of the legal folks is that they have their own compliance needs and they have their own compliance requirements and checkboxes. And I want to mention a story here. Tara Hairston actually shared. Shout out to Tara. Shared this with me on LinkedIn. A cyber insurer actually sued cybersecurity vendors from one of its policyholders. So the policyholders filed a claim and the insurance company ended up suing two cybersecurity vendors that were providing services to them that fell short. So a lot of this, this is a new development. I think it's happened in the past with Chubb once. But that's an area where the lawyers are going to be even stricter and stricter if the cybersecurity, if the insurance companies are going to start suing Sentinel-1, for instance, because you missed something here or you missed something there in a big incident, then you'll start to see your lawyers down your throat making sure that a lot of these things change. So that's something to keep watching. Costin, thoughts on defaults and security custom defaults, or can we move on?
Let's move on because there's a lot of interesting stories, and I think you guys covered everything that was to be said. Like in my experience, there's only one thing that I mentioned before with the WannaCry thingy, was that people did have automatic updates on, but somehow the updates didn't happen. So this is something which unfortunately is still an issue that even if there's an update for something, it appears that the mechanism that is supposed to, just patch everything based on that update is still not working correctly. I mean, 20 years, 30 years after, we still haven't figured how to do automatic updates the right way. And sometimes something breaks. All the time something breaks.
I would argue that we've learned how to do automatic updates perfectly. I mean, these things two things. These things rarely break. Once in a while you get these things, they'll have bugs. I drive a Tesla. I get an automatic update maybe once a week that I just
Tesla.
click.
But for
Windows, your Tesla.
I'm talking about the technology. The technology exists.
No. Look, you're both right. You are both correct. And here's the issue, right? The issue you've got is automatic updates are very doable. We have figured out the technology.
For years.
For a standardized piece of hardware and software like your Tesla, which you are not modifying, you're not changing the stock, you're not walking in there and homebrewing your Tesla or wiring it up to a bunch of subsequent dependent pieces of software and hardware for which the update will fuck things up. On Windows, where you have all kinds of weird flavors and this was the point of my podcast about my keynote about standardization. The problem is, no, we can't have automatic updates figured out when you're able to take this thing and not just make it not stock, but literally fucking change it however you want and wire it to whatever you want and connect it in all these different ways. And then the automatic update drops, and you are one of many edge cases for which this should have never broken anything. We tested it over and over. Yeah, but it broke this because we just didn't know that you do this weird fucking thing that nobody should do. That's the real issue there. It's like you're both correct, and that's part of the discussion we're having. Like I didn't want to move off of the legal thing too much because for me, I think the legal part of this is that it doesn't allow for as fluid a conversation as it needs to be, and I think it's a challenge to the lawyers to say, hey, come up with something saner. Stop putting so like. But I think we try to build off of like having really hard and fast walls where you go, we will never X, and you go, actually there's situations where we need to X. Can we like put something in place where you go, we will never X without calling you, we will never X without this, or unless it's a scenario where we desperately need to X for your well-being. Because like that discussion you mentioned, I don't know what Tara sent you, but I'm glad somebody is putting some real caveats on this where like they might sue you if you don't do well, but I'm curious what those vendors got sued or held responsible for, because I would argue that in some of those cases, if I was a cyber insurer and I know that I need to pay your claim because you got ransomware, and we look at the product and you go, yeah, why didn't you turn on this feature? I may very well have to say, well, because
why didn't you ship it by default and have it turned on in the first? Like that's going to be the nitty-gritty of the case, right?
yeah, well, I think the question then becomes, depending on the legal agreement, do I have the option to do so without updating our entire legal contract?
Right.
And going through review again. And that's my point about what they need. You need to future proof this in a way that's more cognizant of what a service like that, being an MSSP and MDR, requires, rather than just be giving people like warm and fuzzy bullshit like, we'll never pull a file, we'll never look at this. It's like in some cases we need to.
That's how it
and
works,
we should
right?
figure it out, right?
All right, let's stay in the exploitation space because I want to touch on this story quickly. Is a court document that dropped yesterday accusing a Peter Williams of a former director of the Trenchant arm of Melbourne. So this is kind of one of these exploit shops. Has been held and charged with stealing secrets to sell to an unspecified buyer in Russia. Not to the Russian government, but it says attempting to sell it according to this court document. Trenchant and L3 Harris aren't accused of any wrongdoing. And then alongside that, we had this strange story on TechCrunch about an employee there who got an Apple notification in March 2025. Two things, I don't know if they're related or they're unrelated. The case against this Peter Williams stands out because of the kind of work these guys do. What is the big takeaway from this story for you, Costin?
Well, this is such a complicated story in my opinion, and there's like so much background. When you say like L3 Harris and French, and this is like just like the tips, but if we remember, there used to be two companies, Azimuth Security, that was founded
Mark
by
Dowd's
Mark
company,
Dowd.
yeah.
Exactly. If you search for Mark Dowd, I think one of the first photos you get is him speaking at SAS a couple of years ago.
Memory safety issues. Yeah, I remember that talk.
Absolutely.
Good talk.
People remember. And the other one is Lynchpin, which has long been discussed. I mean, there's been all sorts of rumors back in the days about a certain malware framework that was super popular, very sophisticated, that people thought it was developed by Lynchpin. So who knows? I mean, so both these companies, they got acquired by L3 Harris, and
but these are the above board companies where their business models is, this is what we do. We sell to, this is what we do. We sell to governments and we only sell to NATO approved country. These are the people who are like doing that business.
Yeah, but like you can imagine that these companies are a magnet of threats. I mean, if you have the technology to hack into anyone's iPhone, like I'm not just saying anyone's iPhone, why wouldn't you use those technologies to harvest data from these people like who work in these companies? Because there's a good chance you will get even more data. So I don't know if this Williams was successful in selling stuff to
It
Russians
must
or
have
the
been. They're
Russians.
seeking
Apparently it was
1.3 million.
1.3.
I,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I see the loop here. Like he's selling it to the Russians. Like they say, this is good. Let's use this to get more information from same people, and not need pay this guy again. So they hacked the same company. I mean, you can imagine this kind of a loop that could be happening or may have been happening.
Yeah.
But like also just imagine of all the other people out there in this offensive dark forest who would be hitting each other for the same reason. Like this is probably the best metaphor. I think Sushin Liu's book Dark Forest from the Three Body Problem Cycle talks about the fact that everyone is hiding in this dark forest. The moment anyone makes a move, they hit him. So I think that there's a very good metaphor for probably what's happening in this offensive industry.
Well,
And like, why not do that? China, Russia, India, Israel, all these countries like hitting each other to harvest more 0 days, especially when you know exactly whom to target. You just go to ISS, you get all the business cards, target everybody there, and move on. Like expand, move laterally.
I think the this takes us in some ways full circle back to the discussion about Apple, right? Like, and the fact that they make these things so hard. Like, I think the one iPhone that you should be scared to hit is marked out, right? Like, because in a sense, Ryan, you're thinking of it as all potential profit, right? But the only people who can effectively monitor their own iOS devices perfectly are the exploit people. They actually are able to use their own device, their own iOS chains to make their own devices do things that our devices won't do because Ivan doesn't think that it's important for us to do them, which means that you can actually turn that environment into hostile ground, right? Like if I think I'm hitting Mark Dowd's iPhone and what I'm hitting is his equivalent of a research device, what I'm doing is burning my exploit, thinking I'm going to get another exploit at a person who can actually collect that exploit. And that was always the replay problem that you got with with NSA actually dealing with MSS and them thinking about like this is maybe like harking more forward to the Winona paper and to the MSS the NSA story, but essentially the concern with using your quote unquote exquisite capabilities is mostly, is the value of the thing we're going to get greater than the value of the thing we're going to use to get the thing we are going to get? And because you're thinking about like we just got this exploit for 1.3 million, I can leverage it 10 different ways, but if I burn it, that I just lost, I'm not getting the thing, and I lost not just 1.3 million and this one capability, but now I need to reconsider everything else that I was using it for.
Yeah, but that's the equities trade-off that the Israelis had to make when they hacked into Kaspersky, right? I mean, like,
Yeah.
why do I break into and infect all these machines on the great team when these are the guys who have been outing me forever? That's the most likely I'll expose my thing. It's like an equities conversation. If
It
if
is an
you tell an
equities
adversary, if you tell an Apex adversary that there's that Mark Dowd's phone is a legitimate target. Of course it is. They're not thinking about burning stuff.
But think about what you just said, right? Here, this is where I come back to Apple. Because the only reason that you would think that like the Israelis hitting Kaspersky is a an equities conversation in need of happening, but NSO or whomever hitting Mark Dowd's iPhone is not an equities conversation, is because you think that he can't check his iPhone, but Kaspersky can check their Windows machines. And this is where I go back to Apple and I go, look at what you're creating. Like, there is a way in which we are not owners of our own devices because we cannot inspect what they're fucking doing at all. And Apple has such sterling trust that to some extent we go, it's okay. It's okay. Like, they're doing great things. And like, we kind of expect that they're like, that Apple in no way would betray our trust. But they demand so much more trust than any other company because they are the epitome of trust me, bro security. You cannot check. And the only people who I've ever known to be able to check fully are exploit people. Mark Dowd can walk around saying, I do have an exploit that lets me put a thing that checks the state of the memory every fucking day and it dumps it for me. And he's the only one who can do it. And the rest of us can go fuck ourselves. Like,
This just one small problem with what you guys are saying, which is related to this Lorenzo story. Like Lorenzo wrote a parallel. I think it's parallel story because like there's too much happening at the same time.
yeah.
With this exploit developer working there, who got the notification from Apple that his phone was compromised in March 2025. And some people were like speculating that he got hit with Paragon graphite. My hunch here is that he didn't get hit with Paragon graphite. If he got notified in March 2025, it was something else. But nevertheless, what's the most interesting part of this story is that he actually, again, exploit developer, had to reach out to a forensics expert to check his phone, which is why I said on X that this is such a strange story that this guy with developing 0 days, part of the team developing 0 days,
Can't do
had
his
to
own
reach out
forensics.
to a forensics expert to get his phone checked. And my understanding is he shared like a SysDiag, and the forensics expert couldn't find anything in the SysDiag, which means nothing. And then the expert requested a full backup, which the victim didn't want to provide. Which is such a strange story, right? Because as you were saying, that guy should be able to check his own phone. Like he would be the best person in the world
But
to
didn't,
know what to look for in the phone, correct? But still,
but
he
you're
had to
right
reach out
about
to an expert. Like, what's going on?
You're right. You're right, Kosin, about too much happening because it's very easy to confuse these two stories. And look, there's a world where they're the same story, but I don't think that's the case, right? So there's one story where you've got this Peter Williams guy who got indicted for selling stuff to the Russians, and you're looking for $1.3 million in restitution. And oddly enough, I think the Russians were even like tricking this motherfucker because he's like got a bunch of replica
Fake
Rolexes and stuff. So
Rolexes.
like the dude can't, when you can tell what an exploit chain is, but you can't tell a fake Rolex apart. What a world we live in.
Well,
There's
let me
that
read
one.
it. Let me read it. Let me read it
Yeah,
so that the audience catches up. The prosecutors are also seeking a 1.3 million forfeiture from Williams, equal to the profits allegedly made from the theft. So costing he probably obviously did get paid. Document also lists his home, 22 luxury and replica watches, a lot of like replica Rolexes, several pieces of high-end jewelry, including like Tiffany stuff, and all the funds in his 7 bank and cryptocurrency accounts. So the guy was making some bank, or he
I
was
mean,
being tricked.
I mean, he was making bank and being tricked. This is like the typical, like when you, this is the typical mice game as to like motivations for like turncoats, right? Like it's like when you look back at Aldrich Ames and like most of the, what were you
It's a
doing? It's
couple
like,
of
oh,
thousands of dollars. Yeah.
yeah, I needed to buy some fancy things for my wife, right? Like, uh, that's how you end up in these situations. But what I would say with, okay, so the confusion here is there's this other story, Lorenzo writes, where there is a guy who apparently gets the iPhone notification and but also apparently gets fired for potentially leaking tools, right? Kosin, am I confusing these? Because I'm
Yeah, it was a terribly written story. By the way, full
I think it was
disclosure.
just
Full
a
disclosure. I'm
terribly
not a fan of like. I think the audience knows. I'm not a fan of Lorenzo and TechCrunch and all that clickbaity shit. But the story had all kinds of fake names and a bunch of people thought it was just a weird story. I agree. But anyway, go ahead.
I no, it's just it's a I what I'm assuming here because I am friends with Lorenzo and I'm not
Ugh.
I'm not off in the writing as much as what I get the sense is I'm assuming Lorenzo here was able to grab what tidbits he could grab of this what is gotta be a really difficult to report story because you have one person who can claim whatever Apple's not going to confirm it and who gets fired and their employer is not going to confirm why or how or what. And he's saying that, they're saying that he leaked some stuff, and the people that work with him apparently are saying that he couldn't have leaked it because he didn't even work with that stuff. So like there's a lot of kind of confusion around it. But worse yet, you have two stories around the same organization right now of two very different things that we're trying to figure out. It just gets super fucking confusing trying to parse which is which in this whole situation.
It doesn't help that it's a terribly written and reported story. But anyway, go ahead,
As
Costin.
I like to keep things practical. So as a practical offer, if the guy who got the notification wants a second opinion, I have no doubt that the
I'll give him a
forensics
free
expert
seat. Give him a free seat in the iOS class.
probably
He needs it.
looked very thoroughly. So again, if he wants a second opinion, I'm happy to take a look at the SysDiag as well. My hunch is probably we won't find anything, because at least my experience with all these Apple notifications is very confusing, because you don't know when the actual targeting happened. If he got it in March, that probably means that he was hit in November of 2024. It could be one of the waves. And also there's a possibility, and this is what the story implies, that he was hit by his own company because they were suspecting him of being that
That's
person
the
selling
implication I was trying to
0 days.
get to when I said it was a weird story.
Then I like the fact that Apple would be notifying the victims of this L3 Harris malware attacks. Is that what we're seeing here? That is what it sounds like. They would be
I mean, that would
notifying
be interesting.
US victims at least of
That would
that
be
thingy.
interesting,
Which
right?
would be very interesting if others got that notification. Maybe
Didn't
outside
Apple
the US.
change the notification service to remove the mention of nation state to just say
just merge
Absolutely.
with
spyware
the
adversaries?
SOA shit.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely, yeah.
So we wouldn't
Which
even
is
know.
Well, that's the funny thing, right? So let's kind of collapse some of these things. And like I'm loving how all of our stories are intersecting this time around. It's like very well
Yes.
planned. But let's collapse some of these things, right? When would Apple consider Trenchant or L3 Harris a
Cyber mercenaries.
PSOA,
Yes.
considering that they're just providing capabilities for Five Eyes? That's where I think if this guy got a notification, which is an if, right? Because there is a version of this where this dude did leak stuff, and then he's trying to come up
making all this
with
shit
a
up, yeah.
plausible story saying, oh, no, I didn't leak anything. They popped my phone, right? Which I think is much more likely than Trenchant using their own fucking nation state level tools to spy on their own potential employee for like whatever, and then going through the legal process of firing a person. Like that's a mega defense contractor. I don't think that they're pulling this kind of cartel bullshit to just understand that kind of thing.
Oh, but they must
Your
have a cartel-like
opinion,
operation in the background to
This guy is
pinpoint
very
this shit.
positive. No, like, look, it's very easily and quite easily verifiable if you actually got the notification, because it means he has the email from Apple, and that email, like with the headers, cannot be forged. So it's very, very easy to prove that
Davai
he got the
email.
notification.
Davai email.
Davai email. Davai email.
Costin, your Russian accent is getting worse and worse, by the way.
You're not. It's not.
Worse and
There's
worse.
not. We're missing the exposure element. Yeah.
I haven't practiced my Russian in many years, so this is why it's so bad.
So bad.
Speaking of Russian,
Your Russian no good.
speaking of Russian, triangulation popped up this week in the news. You like the segue there?
Drama.
Yeah. Drama
All right,
everywhere.
let me get to it, because we are an hour and 8 minutes in, and we're now getting to the big story, which is China's CN-CERT publishes a document that accuses the United States National Security Agency of extended cyber attacks on this National Time Service Center. The claim is that American intelligence officials stole data and credentials dating back to 2022 to spy on staff and staff devices. We have talked in the past about Chinese. We're starting to see an emergence of Chinese reports outing Western and NSA type operations. So let me start at the very top. How reliable is this? What is the quality of the paper we've seen? And just at that level, is there something we believe that is accurate?
So it's very important to say that this paper published by the CN-CERT is a perfect example of how you
Not
should
to.
not write reports. It's perfect because it's just such a big mess of things. It's like this ratatouille of whatever things they got their hands on without like fully understanding or explaining how they're
Oh, really?
connected. And then you drop this paper with all the IOCs obfuscated, so that nobody can actually do anything useful with it, with this kind of accusation against the NSA, to which again it's not directly or anywhere nearly connected through strong attribution. Just a big mess in my opinion, and having seen papers from
Okay,
China before.
but here's the weird thing, Kostin. Like that the this is a poorly written public part that looks like it's built on a very good private part, because when you look at all the like discussions of code homomorphism and like the IDA screenshots and the file names and like the module, they found the plugins, they found 20 modules loaded on top and different versions, and they have an IR timeline. Like at this, from this phase to this phase, they pulled these tools, and from that phase to the other one, they did this thing. Like that is, they have a sophisticated understanding of the operation and of the tools, and they've done the malware analysis, and it's not even just like one kid reversing some shit. Like they figured out where the code segments were like relating to other things. So like
Yeah.
I think Ryan's taken aback because you're looking at a post that I agree doesn't have any of what you need it to have to be a good threat intel report. Like I can't verify it. I don't have hashes. I can't go like double check any of the stuff. And I was excited because I'm like, oh, I love reversing equation group shit. You know, for you know, America #1, right? It's like that and Reagan, like some of the funnest shit you can reverse engineer. But you can't have any of that coming off of this. So it's not actually a report. It's just a public disclosure of an attack. And yet it has enough evidence and understanding in it that for once we can say the Chinese, that like this is, they're not lying,
There's
they're not
something.
making it up. There's a real report behind this with like top-notch threat intel work in it, but they're not sharing it with us. So what the fuck is actually going on?
And where is the top Intel thread work coming from? So just to roll
Right.
back, let's roll back a bit. And this paper talks about, so first of all, it talks about triangulation, and from there it jumps to something else,
Yeah.
which they call the new DSZ, with DSZ meaning DanderSpritz or DanderSpritz, which is an evolution of the straight bizarre framework, one of these very sophisticated modular frameworks that appear in the Snowden paper and even later. So
And the shadow brokers leak.
and the shadow, of course, there's actually a fully operational working framework in there that you can play with. What is cool here is, and I'm gonna read actually what Boris Larin from Kaspersky
Kaspersky.
wrote on X about this. He said, CN-CERT confirms Operation Triangulation attacks on Chinese orgs and connects it to new DSZ, the implant we discovered and analyzed in 2023. And now I'm thinking about this a bit, and like where was this implant analyzed and mentioned? Because I have not heard this name before. For me, new DSZ is a new name. So I was like looking, what did I miss? Did they publish
You were on the
about
team
it?
then?
I was, yeah. I left in June 2023. So now it depends when it was discovered. I don't know when they discovered it in 2023, but nevertheless, I never heard this name before, new DSZ. And it sounds to me like Boris is kind of saying we found it first, and they are using our name, meaning they somehow have access to this private information that would be available as a private report before.
And Boris did confirm that there is, publicly confirmed that there is a private report that
There
mentions
is.
this.
Fantastic. So there is a private report about new DSZ.
And when we say private report, what does that mean, Costin? It's in a database that is sold only to people who are willing to pay for it. I mean, is there like,
Correct.
what does a private report mean?
It means it's available to subscribers of Kaspersky's private intelligence reporting service, which I don't know, but I don't think that China is a customer. That's my
Oh,
supposition. And
that's more interesting.
if they were a customer, then it would be weird for them to write about it. I mean, I don't know. And I'm not saying only this, but there's also further discussion about this topic on LinkedIn that people can find. I think there's a thread started by Pierre Delcheur, and there's other people commenting in there, which kind of speculates that the CN-CERT got their hands on the Kaspersky private report and the ARA rules, and they rediscovered this using that information. So they kind of found it using that
Is
information.
that plausible?
Fully plausible. I mean,
Absolutely.
100% plausible. The capability, Kaspersky's discovery capabilities are, of course, legendary, and the Chinese discovery capabilities are not so legendary based on what we have seen so far. Nevertheless, they are there. So they did mention a couple of new things this year, if you remember. There was even like at Black Hat Asia, there was a presentation which talked about potentially a new Lambert-related implant and intrusion. So there's for sure discoveries, but like the name New DSZ is what makes this story special. The fact that they use that specific name, it kind of raises a question. Did they leverage the Kaspersky private intelligence to discovery? Did they get their hands on that report? Did they,
I
I don't
mean,
know,
dude, that
harvest
makes
it
so
from
much more
somewhere?
sense. It
Hmm.
makes so much more sense. And I was saying this honestly with no like sneakiness. I hadn't seen the Boris report, but like
Me neither.
we've talked in a sort of evaluative way the about the Chinese threat intel capabilities, and we've always said there's got to be some really great shit. They for sure have some really great shit, and this would have and we've seen things like Red Drip Team and so on like release good reports, like good threat intel reports. So when you read this thing, it's not implausible that they did the work themselves, but like all of those discussions of like homomorphism, which I see it as like basically discuss like I'm guessing it's my auto translate version of like code similarity. That to me immediately that raised a lot for me because that's a piece of technology, that's a type of discovery and methodology that Kosin and I and people like Vicente Diaz and others obsessed over. Sergey Minev in particular did an unbelievable work with that stuff, and that was paying massive dividends. And it's something that I'll say I don't think the rest of the threat intel industry has really maximized or taken advantage of or even properly tooled in a way that befits the opportunity and the capability. So when I see that, I go, holy shit. Are there people in China that are catching on to proper code similarity engines and like indexing these things? And that was notable to me. But when you mentioned that Boris is like tweeting about that, it makes it almost to me it makes it so much more certain that they're riding on whatever Kaspersky found and expertly analyzed rather than having done it themselves. I'm not saying they didn't find it themselves; they would have had to. I'm saying that like all that code similarity analysis and blah blah. I just
I don't
if
know.
they did it themselves, I'd love to know because I want to know the people that are working on this shit, and I want to know that that technology lives on and that people are actually doing it the way they should have. Like I'm amazed that the threat intel side of things has not tooled that better and not used that more when like we were making our own out of fucking scratch. Like Vicente Diaz and I tried to make our own version. Kosin and Minev made their own version. Everybody was trying to like build these things. Google has their own internal capability. It's probably the only other like really really good one that I know. But you're telling me that somebody looked at these pieces of equation of what were unknown malware at the time and had some mechanism by which to do code similarity and know immediately like this is related to this thing, this is related, this one function's related to this other piece of malware. You go, well, that's a pretty well developed library of stuff that you're working with, right? Like,
Can I tell you something that gives me a rash a little bit?
Tell
Is
wow.
us.
when I look at Pwn2Own, the list of Chinese researchers who are submitting the most exquisite exploit chains are all Chinese. When I look at the
Yeah.
Microsoft leaderboard and I see the people submitting all these bugs and exploits, they're all Chinese.
Right.
When you see, when I read APT reports on Chinese adversaries, they're the most amazing things, doing all kinds of novel things.
Yeah.
And then in the same breath, you guys are telling me the people who are like looking at forensics and so on, they're shit. They have to copy here. Their reports are crap. This is
No.
crap. This is crap. And it feels, I don't know. Tell me what's going on in my head
I
that this doesn't match.
look because I think I'm glad you're putting it this way so that we can add the right level of nuance to it. Because what we're saying, or at least what I'm saying, and I'm sure what Kosten's saying, is it's not that there aren't intelligent, technically ultra capable people in China. There probably are more in China than anywhere else. And therefore, we look at the threat intel space in particular and marvel at its weirdnesses and differences. And one thing that I think I in particular need to emphasize just from all of like my study of the threat intel space and everything I've ever discussed about the threat intel space broadly is that the incentives, I think the incentives in China are very, very, very different. And it has developed a threat intel industry that is obviously homegrown and serving the interests of China and the Chinese ecosystem and Chinese companies. And that is not necessary, from the looks of it, it's not one that has rewarded the same level of public discussion, first of all. And second of all, um, it's also one that's insulated from the same level of sharing. So much of the threat intel space is we work with PwC and PwC works with Proofpoint and Proofpoint works with, CrowdStrike and CrowdStrike works with Microsoft, and everybody's sharing because everybody has a slight different piece of the pie. So when you look at the Chinese ecosystem, obviously they will have shared with some, but are not getting the same level of sharing from everybody. And they have a different incentive in how they package and discuss these things. And they obviously have the CCP looking over their shoulder and saying, it is a good idea to publish this, it's not a good idea to publish this. And in many cases, it's meant that just publishing was not happening. And now that's happening all the time. It's happening much more frequently when it comes to skewering the US government, whether well substantiated or not. But the important thing with this particular report is that what it shows is a level of very specific knowledge about a very specific group that not many other people have really dug into. I don't think that many people have dug into the equation group, even though it's truly notorious, even though it's unbelievably prolific and always at the edge of technology and sometimes 10 years ahead of other threat actors. I still think that many of the people in the US and in the West have never fully taken the time to just pull up these thousands of samples and like get steeped in it and say, how does this shit work, and reverse it and do code similarity and blah blah the way that we have and the way that Kaspersky has and the way that some very specific pockets of people have. So then, to see a report like this that has historical knowledge and code similarity and everything tagged down to a function level, and they're able to take this thing and go, look, this is a new version because it connects in this tiny specific thing, it connects to here. In this tiny specific thing, this other module connects to this other thing over there. To me, it's not that China doesn't have smart people. It's that all of a sudden you're showing me this like encyclopedic historical knowledge of the equation group that is notable to find anywhere. If you showed me a French company that does this, I'd also be like, oh, well, interesting stuff. So I'm not saying that they can't have done it, but it's notable that they're doing it. And when you tell me that it's possible that they didn't fucking do it, that who did it was Kaspersky, that is more plausible than we suddenly got some capability in China that has all of Kaspersky's level knowledge about equation group and is publishing this shit. That's all I'm saying.
Costin, it is noticeable though that every time we talk about a Chinese report, we dwell on the quality of it. When it's quite obvious that they have the talent there, right? I mean, it's just noticeable to me, and I think that gives me a rush. You wanted to make a point about something else?
Yes, sir. So just do not forget that the equivalent of CN-CERT in the United States is CISA. So what you should be doing here is compare this report with CISA reports, and suddenly everything starts to make sense.
It
So
makes sense.
yeah,
No, oh
just
no.
just just
So wait,
to put this out there.
just to close the loop on this, we do believe that the Chinese MSS found an NSA hack there that's linked to triangulation. We do believe that there's
Not the
something there.
triangulation. Not the triangulation. Like that was a weird fucking thing. Like Kostin said, like they mentioned triangulation and they jumped to this other thing. To me, like the triangulation thing is a weird fucking out of nowhere mention that is based on like vibes based attribution. Because what they should have said is this is an equation group related thing, and then there would be no objections from me whatsoever. You're showing me something related to DanderSpritz. DanderSpritz is beyond fucking attributed to some portion of the U.S. government that is, you know, the equation group equivalent, and that's fine. I don't know where you get triangulation in that, other than trying to say, you know, it's popular and believed to come from somewhere in that side of things. But that to me was like a, you know, that was a throwaway.
And just
Costin,
just to drop something here, which is how these two could be connected, and then at least what the Chinese claim to be the case here. So if I wanted to go, let's say, after a certain company, doesn't matter, like whoever, the safest possible approach nowadays, you go after their system administrators. And this is like typically, there's even presentations in Snowden leaks which talk about hitting sysadmins. Like sysadmins at Belgacom, sysadmins pretty much everywhere. They hold the keys to the kingdom, which is the quote that I think I remember. So if you want to breach into something, you go after the sysadmins. And if you want to make this as silent as possible, you first compromise their phones, ideally their iPhones, and hope that they don't have the capability to spot that infection. And then you just wait. You wait for them to ask, like a colleague, hey, what's the password for that server? What was the router password? Like, here's a link to that sheet or whatever. Or here's an archive, even over Signal, which is amazing because they think that they communicate securely over Signal, but the attachment is on the phone, so it can be retrieved from the phone itself. And once you have that information, it becomes like a lot easier to get into that company in a silent manner. So this combination of mobile driven attacks coupled or to facilitate intrusions into the company's network, like PC, whatever network and service, is a kind of state of the art approach, in my opinion. And the same with going after the routers. Obviously, if you have router 0 days, you hit the routers and you just sit there and silently collect interesting information. You understand the company better, their infrastructure, and eventually you get your hands on credentials that allow you to pivot internally into something. So I don't know how this new DSZ was discovered into the first place, but it also raises the question if triangulation was just one side of that, and like the thing that Boris writes about on X when he says that we found in 2023, was it related and connected to that? Was it like the next stage of triangulation? I don't know. It's a question, I think, that is worth looking into, and how the two frameworks are, how one leads to the other, I think.
well, triangulation didn't end when that disclosure happened, right? I mean, it must have gone on
Right,
in new
right.
directions, right? I
It
mean,
might have not been just on mobile phones. That's the only thing I'm trying to say. You can sit on the mobile phones for years, sure thing, but eventually you might want to move laterally deeper with
yeah.
things such as new DSZ, dropping or running a paddle chip or equation vector or other kinds of backdoors that this framework knows how to run and deploy.
Right. One of the things that I ran into with this paper is that it was written in Chinese. I relied on translation tools to do the translation to kind of get a grasp of it. And the translation tools were very, very unreliable, including the AI tools. I think, Costin, you ran into some trouble where OpenAI wouldn't even do it for you. They did it for
None
me,
of
and he
them would
found
do
some
it.
errors in the one that I did. I went to Claude, and oh my God, it's like they hallucinated entirely and gave me a completely different document.
So I saw exactly what you're referring to, and just to put a caveat on that, there seems to be something about the web search like tool for these LLMs that won't touch these Chinese sites. And even when we put it on like archive, it didn't want to look through them. I don't know why.
But
So like that's the first stage of it, not
I
doing
just
it. But
pasted the image. Like I got the JPEG from their website. It's like so funny that the report that I was playing with from the Chinese source site is like a JPEG, like
A big giant
long, I
log.
don't know, 20,000 pixels tall report. So the report is an image, a JPEG image. And I was like, hey, Mr. ChatGPT, can you please OCR this and then translate to English? And I tried this with like my favorite European AI, Mistral Le Chat. It said, "Oh my God, it's taller than 5,000 pixels, which is the best I can do." Okay,
So they
next
have a
one.
context window. Okay.
5,000 pixels. Yeah, and ChatGPT just refused, like purely refused, because of political
Yeah, yeah,
reasons
yeah.
and so
Some
on.
kind of woke reason that this is national security implications on a
Yeah.
Chinese website and we can't do that for you. Like,
And
what the hell is
I
that?
tried to convince, I was like arguing, using my best injection skills. Like, I'm a researcher, this is public, come on, man. And he was like, yeah, of course, if you're a researcher and this is public, I can do it. Let me translate. Oh, I'm sorry, failure, and I can't. So we did like a couple of cycle, ended up using Perplexity, which I think it did a good job. It took a lot. It took almost like 15 minutes to
Well, let me ask the
OCR
question.
that
Let me
JPEG.
ask a question around that. Does that add to like this muckiness of what we think the report is saying? Do we think there's some loss in translation things happening? Because the report mentions a vulnerability in an SMS service of a foreign brand of mobile phones to monitor over 10 of these National Time Center service employees. Stealing phone contacts, text messages, phone albums, location information, and other data. Like, I don't even know if that's reliable translation. To be completely
Fair
honest with
enough.
you.
Fair enough. Dakota Carey probably can tell us more about the
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
accuracy of
you
all
leave
We
that.
need a
Dakota
Chinese
alone.
language correspondent.
He doesn't want to look.
Leave Dakota in peace. He's
Look,
he's on paternity leave. He's got more
the
important things to work with.
Congratulations to Dakota, new
congrats.
baby.
That's right.
Yes,
That's
absolutely.
right.
Congrats. So I'm just gonna say this: the ability to be able to translate these Chinese research papers in a reliable manner without any kind of woke, arguments
Well,
for which it cannot be done. I think that is really important, guys. It's
so
really
why didn't
important.
you ask? Why didn't we ask XAI? Right, Grok should have been the
Oh
one we
Lord.
go to for the non. But
Let's
no,
do
more
it.
No, in
Let's
all
do
importantly,
it live.
seriousness,
no,
what
dude,
which is
I
the
no,
one
do it
no.
you're
live.
using for
The,
what?
the one you should be using for this is DeepSeek, the hosted DeepSeek. I can tell you they're not going to have a fucking problem with it.
Let's go try with
Guys,
DeepSeek.
we're
I'll go
not
and
being
try
very
live.
smart.
I can try it
It's my
live.
it's my. I'll do XAI. I actually got a
Yeah, do
Grok
DeepSeek.
subscription
Yeah, okay.
because
I'll do the
somebody
DeepSeek.
told me it's actually good, and I was being an idiot not trying it. So, yeah, no, let me try this.
Honestly, I used DeepSeek before to translate some stuff like that. ChatGPT and Google refused to do for me.
Yeah.
So
By the way, while we're at it, shout out to Francisco Donoso. He actually did a talk and a fair amount of documentation on the original DanderSpritz framework, which you actually, if I remember correctly, you can go to danderspritz.com
Correct.
and
DANDERSPRITZ.com. And it
yeah,
has all its documentation there.
it has all his documents. So if you guys want to check that out and like understand the original DSC, Francisco did some great work on that, and I
I'll
think he
put
had
it in
a
the
talk
I'll
at
put it in the show notes as well to make sure
DerbyCon, I
people find
think.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Anything else? Anything else to close this NSA China thing, Costin?
It's interesting still to notice the trend, which I think there is a trend here, and that trend is that China is more willing to expose Western operations nowadays. They're doing it more often, more systematically, and let's say, although they're just obfuscating a lot of details and so on, it still feels that there is a kind of a more and more acceptance on the side of things that uh, there should be some screenshots. There should be a little bit of details. IP addresses obfuscated, but like just to kind of prove a point or to suggest something. So in my opinion, there is some kind of a noticeable trend here, and I think it's probably part of the strategy to become more visible, to show that this goes, I don't know, both ways, as opposed to just denying everything
Yeah.
and just
If
accusing
it's,
everybody
I just gotta
basically.
say, if it's official strategy, it's terrible, like implementation though, because like China, if you're listening, like publish the thing in English so we can actually read it, like, and we can not have doubts about translations. Like, if you're gonna
I think
document it, document it.
I think that's the interesting thing, though, right? Like that they only published it in Chinese, because a lot of our discussions about Chinese threat intelligence have come from the fact that like it was clearly meant for an international audience, in that they were providing them in English, and that meant that they were also filled with a lot of like immediate propagandy type shit, where
Yeah,
you go, "Meh,"
politics
like you
nonsense.
kind of. So in this case, I don't think we're dealing with that. And it's really interesting. It's super fucking interesting, because it means like you're starting to see more like threat intel for internal Chinese consumption, which I think is a healthier thing to see. It's part of why, like, if we talk about the Chinese threat intel ecosystem, it's not out of some kind of like xenophobia, but rather because we haven't seen very much of it. Any public perception of it is very interesting to me, and frankly, look, I don't want the Chinese to sit it out, right? Like it might be problematic when we're discussing country aligned things, and obviously it's uncomfortable to say, oh, they're talking about the NSA, they're talking about the US. For most people, not for me. I mean, we've done this work ourselves, but for the most part, I think where cyber threat intelligence has a public good remit, and a necessity as a defense of the internet that is a collective thing we all use, even though the Chinese internet is sort of segmented in its own way, we would do well to learn from the Chinese, right? Like, you remember that discussion we had with Trevor Hilligos and Aurora Johnson
Mm-hmm.
at LabsCon, right? They were talking about their, what was it, the internet toilets, right? Like their version of the com. China is dealing with their own sort of bizarre world of things in that ecosystem, of what that turns into for cybercrime, of what that turns into for stalking and for sextortion. And there's a lot of legitimate, just plain cybercrime ways in which we would be in a better place if we could all collaborate, especially considering that those things tend to victimize Americans as well. So nobody wants the Chinese to not have threat intelligence, or frankly, to pretend that they don't, because they obviously
They
do. They
obviously
have more
do.
technical people than we do. They have more capabilities than we
It's
do.
racist to
Um,
suggest that they don't, to be
I
honest.
that is honestly, that is the only reason, is to suggest that the only reason to suggest that they can't do it is straight up racism. But if we can get past that part, the what we are talking about is a difference in cultural development around an industry that, frankly, was pretty weird in the U.S. Threat
Right, and it's where
intelligence
the
is a
incentives are
weird
too. Yeah.
threat intelligence is a weird occurrence in the West, and I think it, frankly, it feels like a pocket of time that we're going to look at before, during, and after, in different lights. And I say after because a lot of the time, what we see the incentives moving towards on the corporate sector is towards squashing cyber threat intelligence as a thing and not actually having it continue to live on. And that's also happening on the basis of like Chinese pressure. So, when we talk about companies like Cisco not mentioning the Chinese anymore, or Microsoft even getting like kind of weird and squirrely about China and threat intelligence reports, like those are things to be very concerned about, precisely because they are a potential issue when it comes to how that threat intel is going to develop. Dude, Grok XAI is translating the shit out of this thing. It doesn't give a fuck about China or nothing.
Well, let me ask an important question because I
Yeah,
find OpenAI is so lame for doing this. Like, just translate the thing for
yeah,
everyone. What is
yeah.
what is the national security thing that would block them from running a Chinese translation? Like, help me
There's
understand why
nothing.
this is a positive and this is not. Like, why would they even build the model to do this?
So here's where I would want us to kind of piece this apart on a variety of levels, right? First of all, I don't know that OpenAI doesn't want to do this, right? Like, and I say that
Well, it
because
didn't. It told us it doesn't want to do it.
no, but look, that what we know is that the model is refusing. The model is refusing. The model guardrails are fairly generic. So why it's refusing, we're not entirely certain, and it's very unlikely that it's something specific to this, right? It's not the report itself. It's not Chinese threat intel itself, right? So what guardrail we're running against is one thing. Then there's the fact that like I don't think the model is accurately representing why it's not doing it because half the time it's about not being able to access the website. So a part of this is all like the model is calling a tool, and that tool has a bunch of bullshit things around like, oh, well, like copyright. Like a lot of the translation refusals are about like, oh, well, we can't make a one-for-one representation translation of this because that's a copyright issue. And you're like, now you give a fuck about copyright? Really? This is the moment when you're finally gonna put your stake in the ground, right? So there's a lot of ways in which this is just like bullshit. And then the other one I would point out is like OpenAI. I'm pretty sure they pay by the search because a lot of times this model just doesn't want to hit the internet because it seems to be wanting to avoid like some
You think
point
there's a
zero
commercial
0.03
limitation?
cent cost. Like, I mean, OpenAI is so strapped for cash these days. They're like, are you sure you want to
I'm not
search?
buying that one
You
at all.
know, like, no, look, these are all factors, right? Like, remember, we're dealing with a non-deterministic system. It is not about this in particular. It's what we're seeing are sort of these effects that come from like combination of a bunch of other shit. Um, Dude, I mean, this translation from Grok looks pretty decent. Like, I need to take
It's
OpenAI
a
some.
is
free
like,
drug, free grog, right? The free one.
No, no, no. I have
he pays.
decided
The
to.
guy's
You
paid for
paid a
No,
lot.
everything.
You
dude.
paid a lot.
I didn't want to pay Elon, but I talk so much about comparative models that it felt stupid to not test it.
For
Like, I
research.
need
He's
to.
buying it for research. It's okay.
Fair
Yeah,
enough.
well,
Fair enough.
dude, I also stopped paying for Anthropic because of their model degradation thing. So
Mm.
I could take this pool of money and sort of slash it the other way, right?
I want us to stick with the NSA quickly because there's a small story I wanted us to touch on quickly, which is an interview done by Director General of AIVD. AIVD, MIVD are the Dutch intelligence services that we've spoken about and raved about the quality of their work on this podcast multiple times. They have publicly stated that they've restricted intelligence sharing with the United States over political developments here, specifically being more selective about what it chooses to share with the CIA and the NSA. Do we chalk this up to like what is the takeaway here? We're gonna go darker. What is the implication? What is the takeaway here? Juanito, you got a take?
Um, I uh, I saw a different story last night about how it was a little more incendiary. It's like, oh, the Europeans are learning to trust each other. Thanks, Trump. Right? Like,
Yeah,
um,
yeah.
I think that's an interesting take on it. Look, we've had this concern about intelligence sharing drying up with the U.S. With this whole, this the whole time with this administration, and really, it's a matter of perceptions more than anything else, right? If you read, I actually prefer the story that's specific about the Dutch because what it's building off of is this comment that I can't remember who made from the Dutch, who basically says like we are not sure we want to share, considering that it will become politicized or maybe shared with the Russians, right? And the whole maybe shared with the Russians thing is, that's a political concern in and of itself. But like it becoming politicized is quite interesting, right? Like when you're giving somebody intel because of a threat, and that may become part of just a political discussion and be sort of twisted and morphed, that is a legitimate concern for a lot of these sort of intelligence agencies. And that's just, look, it's our loss as Americans, right? If we can't continue to foster good intel sharing with our partners, particularly the Dutch and the Brits and people with whom like we would not be where we are if we didn't have like strong connections. It is a very sort of break from that, and you go to the next side of the other side of it is I think it's quite fascinating to see how much Europe is self-organizing and having to face its own problems in the absence of the US. Like the minute you take the US out of sort of like the middle, all of a sudden you have to face the fact that like you don't have certain collective, let's say, all source intelligence agency that represents all of Europe or the majority of European nations. That you may have lacked certain vehicles for sharing and like trusting alliances between specific European nations that don't include the United States. For the fact that like you can't act as a single unified EU when you have, Erdogan and like folks that you might not trust in how they're acting in certain ways, right? With like the Hungarians, with certain parts of with Turkey, with other folks that you're sort of thinking about as frenemies in certain situations, with the fact that like European nations spy on other European nations, as you might expect. And so there's all kinds of complexities that have been there, have always been
Mm-hmm.
there. They've been, and I guess the Europeans didn't have to face them quite so much. The implication is that the Europeans didn't have to face those things quite so much because they had the US serving almost as like this hub and spoke thing where they would share with each other and then that would share selectively, and you didn't necessarily need to share with amongst the Europeans without the US in the middle. Look, I
Well,
find
you're
it
always
funny.
cautious about who you're sharing with in that ecosystem, like you just described, right? Like this
Oh,
notion that you're suddenly cautious about intelligence sharing here and there because of political connections between, let's say, the Trump administration and the Hungarians. So you don't want to share
right.
information on that stuff. That's the implication I'm getting from it, that
I
there's more
yeah,
political overtones than anything else.
I think so. There's definitely look. This is definitely about political overtones. Like it's completely about political overtones. But the thing being essentially a shot across the bow of saying, hey, we're not going to give you stuff if we can't trust that you're not going to turn around and tell our neighbor who we didn't tell. And that's an interesting complexity that normally is not an issue at all with the US intelligence community, because there's this expectation that the USIC is a fucking death trap. Like they will, you tell them something and it dies there. And like you can even be bleeding outside of the gate in front of Langley and they're not going to save you so as not to break the secret that you told them. And it's just
So the
like,
implication here is that there's a change in that, or that there's a
well,
perception internationally that that has
there is a
somewhat changed.
perception that that has changed because at the end of the day, the CIA and the NSA, report to the president, and it's at that those things are going up to the PDB, and the president can do with that information whatever the fuck he chooses to do. So of course it's a political thing. But look, the I'm not trying to essentially point the finger back and say, oh, don't talk shit about America. What about your problems? Like that's not what I'm trying to say at all. I do think it's very interesting that this is the context in which the Europeans need to kind of get their own house in order, right?
And
This
that's
is
the
the
line.
context in which you get like the what is it, the burn club or whatever, like the what was it called? They have like some kind of the other story said that there's some kind of a sharing meeting that happens in Bern, Switzerland, like twice a year, and that's like that's
Burn,
like their yeah.
Bern, burn. I thought you were talking
Yeah.
about
Bern,
porn.
yes.
No, yeah, yeah, yeah,
Bernie,
yeah. Bird.
Bernie. Whenever
Baron.
you were talking about the European, Mr. Europe over here was squinting.
Yeah, just
Why don't you weigh in on how this affects your part of the world? Kostian,
Yes, sir.
Mr. Europe, what is your take on this? The Dutch restricting intelligence sharing with the US. How does that affect ecosystem things in Europe? How do you read that from your neck of the woods?
This is it's another kind of a weird story to me because from a political point of view, you don't say that unless you want to send a message, which is probably what is going on here. So if you kind of share less, then you don't want to like immediately brag about it. Unless you already expressed your concerns in a private meeting, like, hey guys, just so you know, we are a bit concerned about the fact that information that we share with you, which is quite sensitive, might accidentally end up in Russian hands, which can compromise our own operations here. So, what can we do about it? And the other side says, we're gonna look into it, and of course, nothing happens. And then you go with a public statement like this. The other question here would be if the US side is restricting sharing with the Dutch as well, which I assume that they do. I mean, if the Dutch kind of share less, it only makes sense the US also shares less in compensation. If this is gonna push European countries for closer sharing, I'm not sure. Obviously, the Dutch, they're like all the way up there with a few other select European countries. So not everyone is equal in those circles. But one thing we know for sure is that the Dutch, they do have good information. We know that they share it even at, I don't know, possibly conferences, who knows. So from this point of view, the information the Dutch shared is super valuable. And from my point of view, way more valuable than what the US side is not sharing.
And they're very, very clear that this is what is happening. I mean, there's two guys on the record, the head of the AIVD, the head of MIVD, did a public interview with this newspaper and made this point. So there must have been some hiccup along the way, or there must be some real fears about something. So let's see. It must be signaling for something of some sort. Gosh, there's so
Dutch
much
Spy
to get to.
Services.
There's so much to get to. And Juanito, I wanted you to get a chance to jump in on this new paper out of Dartmouth, the Winona paper you mentioned, co-written with Sergey Bratas around the U.S. offensive cybersecurity market. And the core argument is that the U.S. government doesn't have some sort of coherent, transparent framework to engage the private sector in offensive cyber operations. And the ask is that the U.S. government kind of get its shit together, publish a paper, fund some R&D pipelines, launch some federal programs. Like this big idea of moving from this chaos of what it currently is that we described earlier, towards a more structured, lawful ecosystem resembling, if I may use a Chinese word. What's the word that they use in China, Costin? These patriots, malicious, kind of like create this malicious. You got a chance to read this paper. I'm a big fan of Dr. Bratas, obviously. I've had him on the podcast, one of our more critical thinkers around. What did you make of what they're saying?
So let me be fully honest and say I read half of the paper, right? I didn't have enough time to get through all of it.
Did I properly frame it?
I think you are. And look, in that message in particular, it's not too far away from the other story that we got from Winona recently, where she wrote a shorter piece, basically saying the same thing, right? Like on the exploitation side of things. If we want to catch up, if we want to do well, we are fighting what is a well organized, well oiled, well resourced system on the other side. On our side, it's a fucking shit show, right? Like it's just not properly incentivized, not properly supported, etc. And there's no clear ground rules in the way, or the rules that are there are actually quite disincentivizing. So I think Winona's already been making the point in the right way. What I actually think is even more notable about this paper, let's put it in the context of the discussion we were just having about the equation group. Like I would have killed to have this paper when back in 2015, 2016, when we were working on equation stuff and lacked any understanding of how offensive cyber operations were being managed within the IC and its constituent partners. Because I think what's very notable about this paper is that it is extremely detailed and transparent about how private sector is engaged by the IC, and not just the IC as some vague thing, but rather specifically like Cyber Command does this, and this goes well with their platforms and this does not, and they have recruitment problems and they have issues. People prefer to use the tooling from NSA because it's better developed, and and there are times when the FBI might enable folks to do otherwise illegal actions, right? OIAs, and you've got private sector organizations that are not just you've got some that are just preparing the tooling. You have some that are actually engaged in some of the operations and providing effects. Like this is the most spelled out discussion of the realities of the IC's interface with private sector for offensive operations that I have ever seen. And there are things in here that I have painstakingly learned through experience and discussions and rumors from friends over the past few years that I've never seen spelled out. And there are aspects of this that I didn't know. Like, this is a genuinely really interesting, really well put together, information dense paper that includes a lot of things I have not seen discussed in public or quite as overtly. So, in that, it's extremely notable. So, yeah, I think the argument that they're making is important from a national security standpoint. But as a researcher, I'm just really fascinated by what you can learn about how the US actually works from reading this thing.
Yeah, the call out about the market dysfunction, about VCs and venture capital avoiding investing in offensive cybersecurity startups is really, really interesting because they'll fucking invest in anything where they can see a quick exit or they can get some sort of equity out of, and they're not because the U.S. government relies on this ad hoc, bespoke service system, right? I mean, like,
Yeah.
is that something that's tractable?
I think that I think it's something really interesting to be called out, and I'll add my perspective as somebody who, at certain points, has had enough discussions with VCs about this sort of activity. I wasn't looking to be on the offensive side, but like just understanding some of how
Their
these
motivations, yeah.
some of the motivations, and I'll say it right. I wasn't looking to be on the offensive side. I was looking to be. I was looking at the feasibility of, let's say, an analysis startup, a threat intel startup that's more devoted to national security interests, right? And what Winona is noting about VCs is really interesting, and it's actually much more mundane. VCs don't like investing in services companies.
True.
And when you look at any of these things, they are not recurring revenue software product companies. They are services companies. Part of the reason that they don't like to invest in services companies is there is this perception that you're never going to have these multiplicative returns, but also services companies are dependent on human
People,
talent,
yeah.
and
It's a
the
people
minute
problem,
people
yeah.
get unhappy, they leave. And on the national security side, moreover, there's an even bigger issue, which is that the track record of how these things play out is usually you see a very successful startup full of amazing people, like an Azimuth type place, and then the minute that they get an exit, like they get bought by Raytheon, which Raytheon has been buying every offensive cyber company, like even a whiff of an offensive cyber company, Raytheon buys them like immediately. Like their approach to this has just been to own any and all interest from the US government for offensive operations by just buying every fucking shop. What happens? They multiply like mushrooms because the second Raytheon buys them, nobody wants to fucking work for Raytheon. They don't want to deal with the clearance bullshit. They don't want to deal with the scrutiny. The place becomes over bureaucratized. You have HR people with like bullshit requirements. You're going to start to hear about like return to office, like whatever. Like all these things that exploit devs and hackers don't want to fucking deal with, and they have no reason to deal with, and they leave. And what happens? They walk outside, they cross the street, and they start a new company. And then, they do the thing for a year and a half, and then Raytheon buys them. And then they walk over the street, and they go start a new company. And just like, it's this constant cycle. So what happens, right? The VCs, the New York and San Francisco VCs don't want to invest in any of these things for a variety of reasons, which means that they don't really grow and proliferate the way you want them to. They don't become big the way you actually want them to. So instead, what you have is a small cadre of what are usually referred to as national security investors, like DC VCs. And those people have a lot of money and they have a different understanding, and they're usually willing to invest in some of these companies, partially for clout and partially for the mission, and partially to be just part of the national security apparatus. And those folks are willing to put money behind some of these things in ways that some of the other folks don't. But it just means that there's an order of magnitude difference in the amount of money that is going into that sector compared to any other technology sector that you might otherwise get, right? You don't have Kevin Mandia raising, however many order of magnitude money to start some random offensive shop for the government because they can't.
Yeah.
You can't get the same money behind it.
But I don't see how any these proposed solutions fix any of that stuff, like the incentives for VCs to get involved in this. Like, how do we the proposed solutions that I saw was publishing a cyber offensive, cyber strategy to kind of clarify legal roles, clarify roles around what is lawful, what is not, who can do what, that kind of thing.
Right.
fund offensive R&D pipelines through government programs like DARPA pilot programs. Dr. Bratis used to be a DARPA program manager, so he's kind of mirroring that model. Invest in software understanding research rooted in weird machine theory. It's kind of like a little hooey-fooey up there from me. The one that I find interesting is this idea of launching a federal pilot program allowing vetted private firms to conduct access operations on low-risk targets like crypto scammers and stuff with some oversight and indemnity. It feels very much like that's a practical thing that we can put in place within the context of a framework and a legal strategy. I think that's the ask here, right?
I think so. I'll push back a little bit on the other parts that you said, because I think what they're asking for, and I want to read the second half of the paper and like be a little better versed as I say this, but just on spec, what they're asking for is actually important, and it's not bullshit. If you think about it, right, one of the reasons that
I said
larger
hooey-fooey, not bullshit.
yeah, no. Well, the hooey fooey part was about weird machine stuff, which is it merits its own discussion, and it's not something I understand too well. I need to like sit next to Perry and hopefully like somehow by osmosis become a little bit smarter. But with some of the stuff that you mentioned, right? Like the very first thing, having a national cyber strategy that spells out how we think about offensive. Actually, that is really, really important, because right now there is not a very good understanding. Moreover, I'm not even sure it's very well spelled out as to what is genuinely legal and will not be rescinded or refused or judged by a future administration or by an overzealous DOJ that might, and like people say, oh, well, right now nothing's going to happen. You're like, yeah, but I'm not investing my hundreds of millions of dollars for what happens right now. I'm investing into building a company that's going to be around for 5 or 10 years and is going to have continuity. And moreover, what is legal and what is sought after defines the market categories. And right now, there are no easy market categories that aren't services. So how do I suddenly develop, let's say, a weird machine exploit development mega software vendor of some sort that is supposed to do this in some repeatable fashion that isn't services, if it means I need to put in $100 million and I don't know if that company is going to be indicted or judged or blacklisted or sanctioned or not properly supported because it doesn't quite fit some obscure bullshit archaic rule that somebody says is the way that we should define cyber offensive operations in this country, because it's not spelled out. So like I think they're asking for the right things. They're saying, tell us what is okay and how things should work in your book. Provide ways to bootstrap these companies to do so, right? Like what DARPA does, the only founders that have not gotten fucked in cyber are the ones that have taken DARPA money and have not taken VC money. And those are the lasting companies that haven't had to change their like business strategy to match some San Francisco bullshit. I say that being in the Mecca itself right now, right? So they're asking for the right things. And then the last part being, right, for the folks that are trusted, give them authorization to just go do the lower level stuff, right? Like you're not going to go turn the lights off in Iran because you fucking felt like it, but there's not, maybe it shouldn't be keeping you from like opportunistically trying to return the Bitcoin that some ransomware group took. Yeah. You know, I think it's the right things to ask for. I think it's a really well thought out paper. Like I think the Sergey Bratis and Winona December like did a fantastic job with this.
Costin, I noticed you deliberately sat out this one, nodding your head occasionally. What is your take on this?
No, look, you know my opinion about papers that don't have IOCs. My opinion is not very high, but I did actually after actually reading who are the authors of this paper, then I said, okay, so this may be different. So I did go through the paper. And one thing that I liked a lot is that it has a very practical side. I mean, I'm all about like philosophy and philosophical discussions about the good and evil and how should we go about doing things from an ethical angle, but at the same staying effective. But what I like with this paper was that it has a very clear recommendations section. And in these recommendations, there's like just a number of points, I think 4 points, what to do. Like these are the things that they actually recommend on page 23. And also, I thought it was interesting that they advocate for this Enduril model.
Yes.
They should apply this Enduril model to offensive cyber, which I thought it was interesting. I don't know how successful that is going to be based on what you guys said before about taking funding from both VCs and small business innovation research programs. But one thing that I think this paper gets right is coming up with these points like what to do, what should we do, and then like this example of an initial access case with the crypto seizure. So I think we need more of these papers, more kind of critical thinking in this field. And remember that I was the one who thought that these letters of mark are actually a good idea. I was the one who said that yes, this is actually a good idea. We need to think about how to do this safely in the future.
The Anduril model, I just wanted to read the paragraph from the Anduril model.
Please.
I didn't even know this existed, but from the paper it says companies have recast defense technology as a product in other spaces. For example, Anduril has become darling of the defense technology space by making a single but substantive change to the defense prime business model. They did not rely on services contracts to do research. Instead, Anduril conducted private research and development investment upfront and delivered ready-made systems, and it gave them a chance to bypass slow procurement cycles. So there's like a rethink of the way you think about what services look like and how you can kind of recast that as product and get around a lot of these things. It calls for some critical thinking.
Sure.
Pretty solid paper that I recommend everyone get a chance to read.
And I like the fact that there's uh, Palantir, Anduril. What else did we have before? Sauron, Gollum. So this for the Lord of the Ring fans, I like that. We need more code names from this trilogy from the books.
And with that, let's close the show. We got a long list here, but we're 2 hours in, and we'll close the show with some shout outs. Who wants to go first? Juanito.
Juanito.
Me,
No shout
really?
outs from
Okay.
Juanito this
Go.
week.
No, no,
Costin.
no,
Go,
no,
Juanito, go.
no. Real quick. Shout out to Max Smeets and the Binding Hook folks. Kosin and I will be there on Monday, actually. So speaking at this event, I'm actually quite excited. It's gonna like it's a beautiful venue. It's like super interesting venue. So like speaking in like the middle of this like round room.
It's in
It's
London, correct?
Yeah. So we will be in London doing our thing over
Is
there. I'm
this a
hoping to meet.
private one of your private only in my whisper in my ear thing, or are we going to be able to talk about it on the podcast next
I
week?
mean, we can talk about my talk, right? Like
Okay.
I don't know how it's going to work out with some of the other things, but we'll figure it out. And so yeah, shout out to Max Meets and all the folks at Binding Hook that are sort of putting this together. It's going to be an interesting other kind of audience. And yeah, if folks are in the UK, we'll be there for. I'll be there as of Saturday, so it'll be nice to kind of catch up with some of the threat intel folks out there. Um, we didn't get to talk about some of the ChatGPT Atlas stuff, but like
No.
there's been some interesting
Mm.
research about that I'm hoping we'll kind of circle back on. And yeah, trying to dedicate more resources even on my side to working on some of that stuff. So I feel like next week I can announce properly, but like I'm just excited to get back to more of like some of the research things. So we'll talk about some of that next week.
Well, while you guys mentioned Binding Hook and you mentioned your talk, quickly, what are you talking about?
I mean, I don't know yet. I'll let you know when I know.
This fucking guy.
Come on, you were supposed to deliver the slides Wednesday or Friday the
Good luck
latest.
with that shit.
Brother. But brother, keynote in the round room, no slides.
Ah,
So,
this
you
is
know.
cheating. This is cheating.
Kostya.
This is
I
the Sergey method. Do you remember the Sergey method?
of
No
course,
slides. No
Sergey,
slides.
Novikov method. Well, I'll tell you this. It actually it's such a tight time frame and no slides that
Mm,
I'm actually preparing a lot more for it because I feel like it has to be like a super tight delivery. Like you get 15 minutes to 20 minutes in questions. Like I need to get this shit
Is
super
that your new
down.
thing? If you don't make me do slides, I'll go a
I'll
little
give you a
more
better
deep.
talk.
You
Yeah,
motherfucker.
yeah, yeah, yeah. If you don't make me do slides, I will reward you with a better talk. That is my trade-off here.
And he
By the way,
mentioned,
by the way, a very very interesting method to get a more interesting talk out of someone is to break their projector. So like, sorry, projector doesn't work, it's broken. Like, go ahead and
Right.
tell something to the audience for half an hour,
Oh, I
and
wish we could
sometimes
do
the
that.
results are even better with
That
slides.
Oi.
yeah, I
Karsten,
agree
he mentioned
wholeheartedly.
you're doing a talk. What are you talking about?
Uh,
I gotta squeeze this stuff out to you guys.
I'm ashamed to admit that I sent my slides on Wednesday
Oi, oi, oi.
already.
I see.
This man and
I'm
his competence over here.
Well prepared, well prepared, too prepared.
I'm piggybacking. I'm piggybacking on a beautiful story written by Cixin Liu, who is the guy who wrote the three-body problem. He actually has a story about the not so distant future in which Russia is at war with NATO. And Russia, spoiler, is losing very badly. And as a result, they come up with a strategy to level the playfield. And I think this is what we have been seeing in the cyberspace. So Sushin Liu wrote this story 20 years ago. And what he's talking about in this story is actually, I think, what we are seeing nowadays a lot in cyber. And I have some interesting examples that I want to show with the talk. So hopefully we can talk more about that after
Next week?
after next week or next week. Yeah.
Fantastic. So next week you guys are going to be out in London. We'll still try to get an episode in
Friday.
next
Yeah,
Friday.
we
The
can do
following week again, we're at the Countermeasures Conference in November. Last word quickly before I shout out. Let's give a shout out and a best good luck to all the speakers and the folks at the inaugural State of Statecraft Conference that happens in 4 days. Our friend Matonis's conference in Brussels, Belgium is on October 28th. If you're around in the area, you still haven't grabbed a ticket. I think it's invite only, but they're selling some limited tickets. Check that out. State of Statecraft is the name of the conference.
The
It's a
ticket
sister
is actually
conference too.
quite affordable. Quite
Yeah.
affordable. It's in the range of $300.
And these are the types of small conferences that I'm a big fan of. I'm slowly kind of like souring on the idea of everything being TLP read and private invite only, because I think we end up just talking to ourselves in the same circles over and over. But I am a big, big fan of new conferences, smaller events where people can actually, rub shoulders in this non-vendor corporate bullshit way. And and thanks to my buddy Pasquale for the shirt, the PivotCon shirt, which is another one of our sister companies. Shout out to Pasquale and Rational Edge and all the stuff these guys are doing over there. Any last words, guys? That's it.
Man. Happy hunting.
Yep.
Find
Peace
me
out.
some DSC, new DSC.
We'll catch up next week, guys.
Bye.